Dogworks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. You can support this podcast on patreon.com/firstpawmedia.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by First Paw Coffee Company, specializing in private label premium blend coffee. If you're serious about coffee, you should check it out. First Paw Coffee's passion is high-quality, small-batch roasted coffee. They take the extra time to taste and get everything perfect before they release new blends. They aim to bring you a cup of happiness each time you pour yourself some coffee. Find out more at ak.dog/free and enter for a chance to win some First Paw Coffee prizes, a book from our collection, and tote bag. One winner will be selected at random each month. That's ak.dog/free.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to Mushing Radio here on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. RadioFreePalmer.org is our live streaming site. You can find all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. And be sure to check us out on social media by searching Dogworks Radio. And today we have a guest calling in from Maine. His name is Jeremy Grant, and he is the writer, producer, director, the everywhere of hats guy for a brand new mushing documentary that I'm really excited to talk about. Jeremy, how's it going tonight?
It's fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. Jeremy, could you do us a favor and introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and what you're all about, please.
Yeah, I'm a videographer based out of Maine, and I absolutely love the outdoors. So for the last 5 years, I've been doing a lot of run and gun videography, and my whole mission is to inspire people to get out, to explore, and to truly discover something awesome. Because most places you go, it's there. You just have to get out and experience it. So that's what led me to this grand adventure on this 285-mile trip through the remote backcountry of Maine by dog sled. So it's a lot of fun.
So you and I were introduced by a mutual Facebook friend who is the subject of this documentary, and we're definitely going to jump into that in just a second. But what is your background with film and documentaries and the such?
Well, it's funny. I actually ran a construction company, and I got into drones because I used to do roofs. So I used to fly the drone to document the roof, and growing up in Maine, I started throwing the drone up in the air and got distracted. And I started putting films together about how beautiful it was. And people started hiring me for that. And I loved it so much more. I went all in. And like I said, it was just one project after the other. And eventually it led to Jonathan, a complete stranger, reaching out to me, telling me about this grand adventure he was about to go on.
So you were a construction worker, had I'm sure experience in the outdoors, being living in Maine. So I'm sure you're used to being outdoors. But you had really no ties to mushing or anything like that up to this point. Is that right?
No ties to mushing at all. And to be honest with you as well, I've been wanting to take on a bigger project and to make a documentary. At this stage, this is the first documentary I've ever made. And so that was kind of a big step. And to figure out the logistics, to film something this big into some of these, incredibly remote spots, it was a lot to take on. It might've been a little too ambitious, but I sure had a lot of fun with it.
Hey, that's okay. We learn by doing, and that's I'm sure that was the case here, and I'm sure it turned out perfectly. I haven't seen the documentary yet, but I was anxious to get you on as soon as we could so we can do a little promos for it and definitely get some of our fans and friends to get a chance to watch it. So, Jeremy, could you give us a little bit longer than the elevator pitch of the documentary itself.
Oh, absolutely. So to really understand the depth of this documentary and why this trip matters so much to me and to Jonathan and, to hopefully people watching, you got to go back to Nome, Alaska back in 1925, 1926, all the way back to the Serum Run. And I know you guys did a podcast on that not too long ago, so I won't dive too deep into that, but it originates, the hero of that story is this legendary dog, Togo. And a lot of people are familiar with the story and they're familiar with the Disney movie, but what the Disney movie doesn't show is that Togo actually retires here in Maine at Poland Springs Inn and Resort and actually starts breeding and has a kennel here. And now Jonathan is the owner of this kennel and running the descendants of Togo himself. And to honor this breed and to raise awareness of the rich mushing history in Maine, he embarks on this never before done trip across some of the most remote country in Maine to go the same distance Togo and Leonard Seppala did to save the children of Nome, Alaska. And he's doing it at the same time that we're in this global pandemic where we're facing different things with these different vaccines. And at the same time, his son is getting sent overseas and is about to become part of the evacuation of Afghanistan. And one of his dogs is blind. And just the conditions get harder and harder through each leg of this adventure. And it's a real adventure right here in this incredible state. And it's something that most people wouldn't think about doing. But Jonathan, with these incredible dogs and his courage, took something like this on to teach people about mushing, to teach people about Togo, and to help raise awareness, to help build a statue for this incredible dog and its history right here in Maine.
That is awesome, and I'm sure it's piqued the interest of a lot of our listeners for sure. So what is the name of the documentary, and how and when can folks get a chance to watch it?
Yeah, the documentary is called True North, Legends of Dogs and Men. And right now you can find the trailer for it on my YouTube channel or my Instagram page. And we're going to be updating and having a full video section on just True North on our website at thetimbercross.com. Right now we're getting ready to submit it to a bunch of festivals because ultimately we want as many people to see it as we possibly can to educate them about this incredible rich history here and these incredible dogs. But the goal is to have it be available no later than 6 months from now online if it doesn't get picked up by a network.
So when you go to these festivals and people see the movie, typically that's kind of that circuit, if you will. Folks can go watch it, and it's usually in a group of other films at the same time. Can you tell us a bit about that process? Is it something that they have to vote on based on the content or the quality of the movie, or is there another process to get you into one of these film festivals?
Yeah, it's literally everything you just said, and then there's some other elements that weave in between it, and it's on a festival to festival basis, and it's just a matter of weaving through the cloud of festivals to find the right fit for this film. And I've been really fortunate. We submitted a profile for the film and put the trailer up on a festival website so we can submit it to different places. And within 24 hours, we've had over 350 different festivals reach out and ask us to submit to it. So we're just kind of weeding through to see where it's going to fit best so we can reach the best audience as soon as we can, because some festivals require you to not have it released anywhere for a certain duration. So I'm not trying to lock it down from the public for a year. I just really want to share this journey and, get this message out with people as soon as we can.
And you answered some of my questions there about it being released well after the festival and that sort of thing. I've been involved with a couple of these festivals with some of these other mushing documentaries over the years, and I've met quite a few folks that I've interviewed on the podcast in the last decade or so that went to some of these festivals and, was part of the premiere and, they had the red carpet and all of those things that they do.
Yeah.
Is that some of your plans with this over the next few months, or are you just going to submit and let folks watch it without you guys being there?
It really depends on what the festival is, and it depends on their response to the film. My mission and my business motto is to continue to surround myself with like-minded, passionate people. And if a festival reaches out and they're really excited and passionate about our film and want to dive in and want to know more about it, well, I'd love to be a part of it, and I'd love to expound upon, some of the back history of Nome, or maybe what I've learned from mushing, or maybe some of the difficulties in filming. But at the same time, if the festival is just happy to air it, I'm happy to let them view it and just kind of get that out there, and, happy to answer questions as needed from afar.
So, Jeremy, before we jump into this documentary itself, I have a pretty good friend that is an independent filmmaker. He makes 1950s style B sci-fi movies, and he goes to a lot of these festivals before they're released, and then he sells them on his website, but also tries to get them on Amazon Prime and Netflix and, all of those other streaming apps. And he has told me on numerous occasions that the world of filmmaking has really changed now that there are these streaming options. Is that something in your pipeline, or are you really focused on getting it out there and allow people to buy DVDs or Blu-rays or whatever?
Honestly, I don't know. This is the biggest project I've created, as far as a passion project. This documentary turned out to be an hour, and, took a lot of time and patience, and it's just this incredible story. And my mission was just to get myself available to him in this experience, and to be able to share it the best way I possibly could. And now we're just trying to figure out where it can possibly go, where it can find a home. If it finds its way on a streaming platform, we'd be excited. But honestly, I've never tried before. So this is kind of a whole new adventure for me as well. But I do know my main mission was to tell the best story I could, and I want to get it in front of as many people that want to see it as possible. If that doesn't make it on network, I don't want it to get locked up for a year and a half. If there are people that are anxious to view it, I want to make sure that I find a way to make it possible.
That seems like a great goal. And as I said earlier, I'm sure you have a lot of people thinking about watching this film as they're listening. So, Jeremy, you had mentioned that you were a part of this expedition, and of course you were along the way to film it. Can you tell us a little bit about the trip itself? What was your role outside of being the filmmaker? Were you part of the day-to-day activities along the trail? Tell us a little bit about the trip itself.
Yeah, it's an interesting line. Jonathan and I had never met each other. We met each other a few days prior to the expedition, and we just emailed back and forth briefly. And I was just coming back from a large trip in North Carolina and had little to no time to prepare for this, but I just saw this incredibly rich story. But what happened is, pretty much as soon as Jonathan and I met each other, we just hit it off. It was just like an instant, almost brother type relationship. And, part of that became me just wanting to help him as much as physically possible, and knowing my goal wasn't to film him from afar. My goal was to get into every single one of these remote spots that I possibly could, no matter what it took. And I wanted to make myself available to him. So as part of that, I was kind of his backup team, so I had a backup sled in my truck. I'd have extra bales of straw. I'd have extra things of food. I'd have extra clothes. Anything that I could do to have as backup and to alleviate some of the extra weight on his expedition sled. Because typically on a trip of this nature, he went over 261 miles was the journey that he's embarking on. And he only had 8 dogs.
Wow.
When we're talking about Togo running 261 miles, he had 16 to 22 dogs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a significantly larger team, and they obviously had, significantly harsher conditions. But even the Can-Am Crown, which is a qualifier for the Iditarod, that's a section of trail that Jonathan ran with his team right here on the Canadian border. And that you have to have, I believe, 12 or 16 dogs to run it. And again, Jonathan's running with 8.
Very, very familiar with that Can-Am race, and it's a doozy there in the Northwoods up there. It's not something to take lightly for sure. So when you guys were out on the trail, was it a day-to-day thing like an expedition, or did you do sections of the trails at periods of time and then kind of wind those together as a cohesive trip?
It was kind of both. My mission, like I said, was to get to him in as many locations as physically possible, which was, easier said than done, because he's going through these sections. The first day was okay because it was mostly on snowmobile trails. But again, there was just a few intersections that we can meet, and I'd have to get myself down these little logging roads. And then even then, we had a misconnect on day one. His gear went down on the trail, and then he actually went behind the checkpoint that I was at. So I completely missed him. So there was just this blackout period, and this was one of the easiest sections for us to find each other. And then as it progressed, day one, he goes onto the Allagash, which is this remote logging town. And from there, there's literally nowhere else to go but into the wilderness. One road goes into the middle of the forest. The other road goes to the middle of the forest. And he had a local guide in the area pretty much just drag a trail with a snowmobile through the woods for him. So now I'm trying to communicate with him. Our radios are not in good connection. So it's a matter of him and I understanding the route that's been laid out on the gazetteer, because neither one of us have a GPS. So it's like, okay, I'm estimating his dogs are running at 6 miles per hour, looking at the topography on this map and the hills based off of the weight of the sled from yesterday. I've got 75 miles to drive in on this logging road, and I can only go 35 miles an hour. And if I want to get there early, just in case, and then I could get the drone up, or I'd get on a snowmobile and try to get to another connection on the sections where we couldn't actually meet on the trail. And some days it was easier than others, but ultimately it was always to start and end the day with him and to see him at least once or twice throughout the day.
Jeremy, you're describing every handler's job on a distance race. I don't know if you're familiar, but the Yukon Quest is the other 1,000-mile race that's held up in this area. It goes from either Whitehorse to Fairbanks or vice versa, depending on the year. And in that race, the handler's job is to, of course, help the musher along the way. And one of the tricks with this race is they have to stop at one point and then sort of backtrack and drive almost, I think it's 600 or 700 miles to meet back up with their musher in Dawson City for a 36-hour layover. So the handler team, it's driving the truck with the supplies, the hay, the straw and everything like you mentioned, is almost doing double the amount of time in the dog truck as the musher is on the trail to provide that support. That sounds very similar to what you were doing. Is that correct?
Yeah. Exactly. Anytime we were just going back and forth, and we'd get into some of these remote spots, and like you said, we'd have to backtrack. And the few occasions where we didn't necessarily need to backtrack, that we could have hit another remote logging road and met with another snowmobile team to get me into some of these spots, there was gear that was required. When I originally set in, Jonathan was going out with his expedition sled fully confident. And then after the first day of some really rugged hills and feeling the true weight of this just battle horse sled that came in handy, he had some reservations. So instead of me being able to make a quick connection, I've got a 4.5-hour trip out to go get a sled, get extra meat for the dogs, then a 6-hour trek in, then get on a snowmobile, then try to meet him at a spot. Plus, training him how to use the camera gear, switching out all of that, and then making sure that I'm getting these shots along the way. And then I did film a behind the scenes that we might put together down the road. We'll see.
This sounds like an awesome experience for both of you. Jonathan and I have talked a few times up to the lead up of this about what he was wanting to do and et cetera. And of course, it's very cool that you took this project on. So I have so many questions, and I'm sure this could go on forever, but I want to keep us under the time limit so we don't lose some of this interview for the radio. So I guess I'm just going to fire these off. The first question is, the terms of the layout of the documentary itself. Of course, your goal was not only to get the footage to show in the movie, but what about the story itself? Is that you doing that breakdown, or is that a combination of you and Jonathan? How did the the story arc itself work out?
Yeah, so historically, when I make a lot of my films, I've got used to doing voiceover and just filling in that narration to fill in some of these moments where you just have this vast scenery, but you need to be able to feel the tone and maybe understand some information. So I did the best I could to build this story, based off the backbone of Jonathan and, some incredible interviews that we're able to get with him at certain sections on the trails and everything. And, I let him tell his story, and, I kind of go through some of the basic information and some of the story of, Togo and, that incredible journey. And then between the two of us, my narration and his interviews and his candid captures, we fill in more of the information. As the story continues, you get more of that full understanding of why these dogs are so important. It's not all just spilled out at the beginning, which I know is a popular way to do it to really captivate, but I want people to be emotionally invested in understanding. And the people that are going to follow this to the end, those are the good people that we really need to help spread this passion and this history.
So next question, did you get a chance to spend any time on the sled yourself?
Yeah, the first trip up with Jonathan, we were actually able to go out and do a 30-mile trip and just kind of gear up and get the dogs ready for, the following day, which was great. But once it came to the actual expedition, it was all Jonathan on that sled, and we needed to make sure that we kept it as light as possible because we wanted to take care of the dogs. And it was already a big task to ask them to, we're attempting, 8 dogs, 261 miles. So we didn't want to put any additional stress. But, that previous day, it was quite nice. It was a blast. And, we've got some big plans for this winter as well.
So what are your thoughts being behind the sled there? I'm sure that you've seen the pictures and the videos and, seen the experience as kind of a follower along. But what is it like to be either the driver or in the basket of the sled yourself?
It would be one of the sports that I would consider, exhilarating and peaceful. It's one of those things that I think once you have that true bond that I've seen, really skilled mushers have with their dogs, it's just a bond that I don't think you can recreate any other way. You get out to some of these remote locations where your dependency on each other is just as high and your respect for each other is just as high. And they're both just doing what they love in this incredible environment. And I can see why people just fall madly in love with it. And once they start, they just can never stop. I can definitely understand and see that.
Yep, you hit the nail right there on the head, Jeremy. I remember my first trip ever behind a sled was back in 1989. And here I am all these years later, and I still get a smile on my face when I take the dogs out, whether it's a quick training run, as I say, around the block here on the trails behind our house, or we're in a race. And I'm sure every musher that's listening is nodding their head in agreement with what you just said. So we have a few minutes left here. Let's talk a little bit about the filming of the trip itself. What did you use? Did you use primarily GoPros and drones and stuff like that, or did you have other tricks up your sleeve?
Yeah, so I wanted to be able to capture it in a few different views. My mission was to try to make something different. I attempted to film the Can-Am Crown a few years prior on literally 4 hours notice, and not understanding the course or knowing any of the mushers. And I was able to just start to see from afar some of these aspects that drove these people to be able to do these incredible feats. And I just knew immediately that I needed to understand the musher themselves to be able to understand the real relationship. And I knew that it was going to take a closer view than just action cameras, but I also wanted people to have the experience of what it kind of feels like to be on the back of this sled being pulled by dogs in the middle of nowhere. So I had my main camera. I had a Sony DSLR, and I was using that anytime I was near Jonathan. That's always the A footage, the interview footage, the taking off, the coming in, the in-between trail sections. But there are sections where, there's 15 to 30 miles where, I might not see Jonathan, or he's just literally passing through and I'm just capturing him with a drone. So I've equipped him with a little vlogging setup where it's got a nice little mic on it and a little wide angle camera that he can talk to and that he can just use on the sled. So that way it's, it has a little bit of that motion that you're feeling as he's, sometimes those dogs, they saw deer on the trail once and they're just zipping down, and the camera's being beat by branches and Jonathan's grinning ear to ear as snow's falling off the trees. We want to experience that, so we don't mind it being raw. And then I was able to introduce a 360 camera and, coach him through certain days to weave in these different types of shots to bring in a different environment to try to hopefully bring the experience of what this trek felt like, to document this trail that may never be run again. So it was, a combination and just putting it together in edit to make you feel like you're there.
So I'm sure you've already mentioned a couple of these that I'm going to ask, but what was one of your biggest triumphs in this whole process, whether it was on the trail itself or post-production or whatever? So what was the biggest triumph and what was the biggest struggle that you had? Because this was a huge project for both of you guys, both the musher and the filmmaker.
I think the biggest triumph was honestly just both Jonathan and I taking on this adventure in the first place. He had a few weeks, that he took to prepare for it. Like I said, I had a few days, and at the end of it, I just remember, just being able to reach out to these resources that had been helping him, and going into this and knowing no one, not having any communication with any of these people. And sometimes I'm driving, 6 hours one way or snowshoeing or doing this to meet someone on a snowmobile that somebody said through a radio call through someone else that I've met said someone might be there to meet me, so every night when I would get into one of these camps, that was just a massive triumph. And for us to be able to get to the finish line, that was huge. And the biggest struggle was there was so much incredible footage. It's just, the scenery is phenomenal. The dogs are adorable and they're so hardworking. And John is so articulate and smart. And he has a lot of incredible things to say, but it's hard to craft and keep the attention and keep people on the trail. And every stop that we made, each of these remote hunting camps or the trail that we're sleeping on out under the stars. Each of these places, could have had 20 minutes of its own just to meet the camp host, which, is kind of like the roadhouse back in the day. But we just needed to kind of keep that moving. So cutting all of that down was definitely the largest struggle.
Awesome stuff. And I'm looking so forward to this when it does come out, and hopefully you will be able to share that along when it does drop, whenever that is, whether it's in 6 months or a year or whatever. I'm sure you will have a bunch of excited fans to watch. So, Jonathan, we're going to put a bunch of links down on your show notes page where folks can find that for your YouTube so they can watch the trailer itself. But where can people follow you? Where do you do your communication, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or whatever? What is your preferred platform so people can reach out?
Well, honestly, it's all the above. I spend a lot of time, if you want to see the more crafted, YouTube videos where we do right now we're wrapping up a fishing series and where we're going to be releasing the documentary, and we do a travel series. Like I said, we're, essentially every week I'm going out on a different adventure and meeting new people and trying to do something fun. That's on YouTube. And then a lot more of the photography is going to be on Instagram and Facebook. And then if you want to follow along, like I said, we're going to have a dedicated page on the new website that's about to drop for True North itself. But we're going to be updating it on all the platforms. So you can either find anything under Jeremy T. Grant or The Timber Cross on any of those platforms. And I'd love to chat and happy to talk about whatever.
Excellent. Well, Jeremy, thank you very much for joining us today. Jeremy Grant is our guest, and we're looking forward to seeing his work when it is available. And good luck to you on the film festival circuit and all of that that is entailed with that. And of course, getting it out on whatever platform you can, whether it's website or streaming services or whatever. I'm sure you will have a very captive audience. Jeremy, it was a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was truly my pleasure.
Thank you. Again, thanks to Jeremy for his time today. This is Robert Forto for Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
From Dogworks Radio, this is Mushing Radio. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Alex Stein and Robert Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto, created for Dogworks Radio.